Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Capital G here, back from another one of my prolonged hiatuses to bring you some more EDH deck techs. Changing up how I'm doing it. This time around, we're going to be using deckstats.net. Just signed up for this. It's a nice little online deck builder. Although keep in mind that any decks that I build on here are using cards I actually own. One card, of course, that I actually own, thanks to Commander 2018, is Aminatou, the Fateshifter. For 1 white, 1 blue, and 1 black, we have ourselves a Planeswalker that can explicitly be your commander. And it's got 3 very interesting abilities that we are going to take advantage of, or at least 2 of those 3 abilities we'll be taking advantage of. Namely the +1, where we can draw a card, then put a card from our hand on top of our library, manipulating our top deck to do favorable things for us. -1 says exile another target permanent I own, then return it to the battlefield under my control. Sure, we said permanent, that means I can blink enchantments, creatures, planeswalkers, lands. Sure, why not? I like that. I'm pretty sure it's the -1 that brought Aminatou to prominence in this format. The -6, I'm sure if you build around it, it's got its uses. Choose left or right. Each player gains control of all non-land permanents other than Aminatou the Fateshifter, controlled by the next player in the chosen direction. Now the idea here is you shift control of all your permanents, and then you can use Aminatou's -1 to take back anything that you had given away as a result. Again, I don't use this too much. I've got 1 card that could interact with this, and I'll show that to you. I'll be showing it to you from the details page here. By the way, I like the way this site is organized. Get your overview. You can see details including what the card types generally are, how the mana is distributed. As you can see, heavy white, light on creatures. And you can also mouse over any card name and all of the details pop right up on screen. So notice I called the deck here Aminatou, adopted by Planeswalkers. In addition to our commander, we have 10 additional Planeswalkers. I also threw in a Call the Gatewatch so I can go get one of them at will. And I also have a Chain Veil here to have multiple activations of our loyalty abilities. Obviously, because I'm playing Chain Veil, I must be playing Tezzeret the Seeker, which untaps up to 2 target artifacts and can also tutor out the Chain Veil by doing -X, X being 4, to bring it from my deck directly onto the battlefield. It's Teferi, Temporal Archmage, of course, that makes this deck go infinite. As long as you have a couple of mana rocks to pair up with it. -1, untap up to 4 target permanents. So untap the Chain Veil, untap some mana rocks, and then tap them all again and get another activation. Of course, this is a -1, so Teferi can run out of counters eventually, or will he? That's what Aminatou cures. Because Aminatou, all she has to do is -1, blink Teferi, he comes back in not only for a fresh set of counters, and can use the loyalty ability as if he had just come into play, because, well, he just came into play, but for every activation of the Chain Veil up to that point, he can use his loyalty abilities again. So it's not too hard to accumulate so many extra activations of Teferi that you can bring him up to 10 loyalty and be able to use loyalty abilities as an instant. That may not seem so useful, but most of our other Planeswalkers will have powerful effects as well. Let's start with Johnny Steadfast. He's here entirely for the -2 to put additional loyalty counters on our Planeswalkers. The +1/+1 counters on each creature that we control is not irrelevant either, in spite of our light creature load in this deck. And the -7, of course, before we go. If it starts to deal damage to you or a planeswalker you control, prevent all but one of that damage. That's absolute perfect protection. Elspeth, Sun's Champion. She's here to give us a bunch of tokens to block with, and she's here to destroy all of our opponent's larger creatures with power 4 or greater. The -7 could come in handy as a closer at some point. Gideon. His 0 gives us a blocker, a 2/2 knight ally in this instance. And his +1 to turn into a creature. Believe it or not, I've used it. Turn him into a creature, swing, activate Chain Veil, get the emblem, blink, and all of a sudden Gideon comes back in with 4 counters, can create another knight token, and we have an Anthem effect in play as well. So Gideon has his combinations in this deck. Liliana Vess, here mainly for that -2, searching our library for a card and putting the card that we find on top of our library. Aminatou lets us draw that new card immediately, making this a perfect planeswalker to complement our commander. Narset, similar deal. We use Aminatou to make sure we have a non-creature, non-land card on top of our deck, and then +1 Narset to draw it back. So this lets us accumulate cards. Narset's -2 is also very powerful, letting us give our instants and sorceries rebound. But as far as Aminatou's +1 ability goes, it's Sorin that's king. Reveal the top card of our library, put that card into our hand. Each opponent loses life equal to its converted mana cost. So we can put whatever card we want on top of our library with Aminatou. And then we use Sorin to draw it back and cause all of our opponents to lose life. The fact that you can also pick off a creature or a planeswalker using his -X is also very useful. And perhaps later in the game, if you've got a bunch of tokens, we can also use that -9 and give ourselves a bunch of tokens onto the battlefield. Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, Bane of Standard, is here. I just happen to have one from my box, so put him in here. He lets us draw cards, so that's primarily why he's here, is the extra card draw. Put that -3 to take any non-land permanent and put it on top of his owner's library, 3rd from the top. Very powerful removal. And of course, if we ever get to the -8, which we will get to the -8, then our opponents are essentially doomed. Not just Teferi doing that, but Venser the Sojourner as well. So, Teferi's ultimate allows us to exile permanents whenever we draw a card. Venser's ultimate allows us to exile a permanent whenever we cast a spell. He's also got a +2 ability that lets us exile a permanent until the end of the turn. It's slower than Aminatou's effect, but it is still very, very useful to have more than one blink effect to reset our planeswalkers. ETB triggers. We have a lot of creatures and enchantments that have powerful enter the battlefield effects. And notice that I'm highlighting the oath cycle. I am playing all 4 possible oaths in this deck because they give us blockers, they give us extra loyalty counters, they give us extra cards, extra scrying, they force our opponents to sacrifice creatures, and they even give us extra activations of our planeswalkers. So, yes. When I have access to 11 planeswalkers, I am going to use all of the oaths. As far as our creatures go, we have Angel of Despair, which can destroy target permanent. We have Cloud Blazer that enters the battlefield. We gain 2 life and draw 2 cards. We have Ixalan. This guy's essentially a Wrath on a stick. He'll come down, turn all of our opponent's creatures into face down 2/2 creatures, and unless they have morph, our opponents will have a hard time turning them back face up. Oh, by the way, we can blink our own face down creatures and they'll come back into play face up. Just saying. We can also blink Ixodron himself if our opponents afterwards play a big threat and turn that card face down. Jace's Mindseeker to hijack some of our opponent's spells if we can, and also mill them a few cards. Muldrifter, of course, also draws us a couple of cards. We can evoke it if we like, but we shouldn't have to. Mere Battlesphere enters the battlefield, gives us a bunch of tokens, and it's a classic commander finisher. It's a giant ball of mere death. Pilgrim's Eye lets us pull some basic lands out of our deck into our hand. We have Playcrafter, which it's another repeatable edict effect, especially if we've managed to generate a bunch of tokens. Prophetic Prism, a card that I tend to get some flack for when I say, hey, this is actually a good card in this format. Because for 2 mana, no, it doesn't ramp us, but it does draw us a card when it enters the battlefield, and it ensures that we get the correct colors of mana. So, turn 2, Prophetic Prism, draw a card. Turn 3, another basic land. And it doesn't matter, as long as I have 2 of my colors already, I can use Prophetic Prism to generate the 3rd color. Cast my commander, blink the prism, and draw another card. So there you go. For 2 mana, I've already ensured that my Planeswalkers come out right away. I've drawn 2 cards. Very good card here. Reflector Mage, when it enters the battlefield, bounce a creature an opponent's controls, and it cannot be recast until our next turn at the very earliest. It got banned in Standard for a reason. Solemn Simulacrum lets us get basic lands out of our deck and onto the battlefield tapped. And Sphinx of Utun to factor fiction every turn. You know, I have a player separate a pile of 5 cards, and we choose which pile of cards we want to keep in our hand. Not to mention he's a big flyer, so he can go on offense for us too. Top deck effects to help with the +1. We've got Brainstorm to draw cards. Draw 3 cards, put 2 on top of our library in any order. Devastation Tide, because for 2 mana we get to return all of our permanents and our opponent's permanents back to their hand for only 2 mana. Vision of Wishes lets us put something on top of our library, and we can cast it for free by activating this ability. Blue 2, and remove a counter from the Vision of Wishes. And we can also blink the Vision if we wanted to refresh his counters. Dusk Mantle Seer says here at the beginning of your upkeep, each player reveals the top card of the library, loses life equal to that card's converted mana cost, then puts it into their hand. This one's a little group huggy, but you know what? We'll be using Animatou's +1 to have a land on top of our deck, so we will never ever lose life to this effect. Our opponents may not be so lucky. Enigma Sphinx. When this is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put it on top of our library, 3rd from the top, so we have ourselves a reliable, easily recurable flying beater. We also happen to have Cascade, so we can manipulate what's on the top of our deck, cast the Sphinx, and play that card for free. Entreat the Angels. White X, because we'll always cast this for its miracle cost, to give ourselves a bunch of flying angel tokens. Angel tokens are just plain good here. And Yennet, Cryptic Sovereign. If the casting cost of the top card of our deck happens to be odd, we get to cast it for free just by attacking with Yennet. And because Yennet is flying and Vigilance and Menace, it's very likely that he'll be able to attack and come home safe and sound. Some artifact ramp here. We're playing a full package of signets, so Azorius Signet, Demir Signet, and Orzhov Signet. There it is. We also have a Commander Sphere as it taps for all our colors. We have Gilded Lotus that taps for 3 of any one color. We have Mana Vault. It taps for 3 colorless, but it's easily untappable with Animatou's blink effects or with our other Planeswalkers. Sol Ring, of course, is here to complement that. And Seer's Lantern. This interacts very well with Aminatou's +1, as we can scry away whatever card it is that's on top if we don't like it. Some targeted removal with Banishing Stroke to put an artifact, creature, or enchantment on the bottom of its owner's library. We, just for fun, have Radiant Purge to exile a multicolored creature or multicolored enchantment. And complementing that is Ultimate Price to destroy a target monocolored creature. No, these are not the best targeted removal spells, but I put them in here just to have a little bit of fun. We have Return to Dust. We can exile target artifact or target enchantment. And as long as it's our main phase, we can actually exile 2 in any combination that we like. Another good card that's out there right now, of course, is Crush Contraband. So if anyone who doesn't have a Return to Dust, Crush Contraband would be a good option as well. And Settle the Score. Not only does this exile a creature, yes, a little slow as a 4-mana sorcery, but it also puts 2 loyalty counters on a Planeswalker that I control. Brings me to that ultimate a lot faster, let me tell you. Settle the Score, really good card if you're playing a Planeswalker commander or a Planeswalker themed deck. Of course, Swords to Plowshares, classic 1-mana creature removal, and Utter End to take down any non-land permanent from the game. Sweepers, I've got a Chroma's Vengeance here to destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments, but not Planeswalkers. Final Judgment to remove all creatures from the game. Skullstorm. It's expensive at 9 mana, but when you cast it, you copy it for each time you've cast your commander from the command zone. Aminatou is fairly cheap, so casting her 2, 3, 4 times over the course of the game is very likely. And the more copies of Skullstorm you get, the more creatures your opponents have to sacrifice, the more life they'll have to lose once they run out of creatures. A very, very powerful, devastating effect. Supreme Verdict destroys all creatures, cannot be countered. And Terminus, for 1 white mana, using the Miracle effect, put all creatures on the bottom of their owner's libraries. And other effects, 5 other really cool cards for this deck. Brago, King Eternal, because once he connects with another player in combat, you can exile any number of non-land permanents you control. That can be the oaths, that can be the creatures, that can even be used Planeswalkers so they get another activation this turn. They'll come right back into play, and we get to take full advantage of those cards. Copy Artifact. We're generally going to use this to copy some sort of mana artifact, so anything that taps for at least 2 mana if we can. And who knows, there might be some powerful artifact creatures that come out later in the game, and if that's the case, well, Aminatou can blink the copy artifact and give us a copy of said big creature. Demonic Pact. This one just adds a little bit of spice to the deck. And this is the only card that actually interacts with the -6 ability on Aminatou. Because let's say you have a Demonic Pact out. You've already made a couple of these choices, because Demonic Pact forces you to choose 1 of 4 options, and you cannot choose the same option twice. So, Demonic Pact lets you deal 4 damage to target creature or player and you gain 4 life. Target opponent discards 2 cards, you draw 2 cards, and you lose the game. So let's say you've already made a couple of choices here. Let's say you've already chosen 2 of them. Now you've got a couple of choices you can make. You can either -6 to move all your permanents, including the Demonic Pact, to a player on your left or right. And if you do that, that will essentially force them to choose that fourth option very, very soon, where force them to lose the game. Or if you don't happen to be anywhere near Aminatou's ultimate abilities, you can -1, blink Demonic Pact, and start this process from scratch. Myria Shepherd. It says here, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may return target non-land permanent from your graveyard to your hand. If it's a plains, you may return that non-land permanent to the battlefield instead. A very, very powerful landfall ability. Landfall not only triggers when you play a land from your hand, of course, you can use Aminatou and blink a land in order to get the landfall trigger. So this makes Myria a way to resurrect artifacts, enchantments, creatures, planeswalkers, all just by playing or blinking a land. And Obsidat's Aid, just 5 mana straight up, return a non-land permanent. Actually, not even, just any target permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So you can actually bring back lands with this if you want. Spoiler alert, you're not. Our target, of course, will be planeswalkers. It will be the Chain Veil, which will inevitably get blown up. So, yeah, and we got 39 lands here. Nothing special to talk about. I'm running a Celestial Colonnade as a attacker blocker. I've got all 3 of the guild bounce lands. I've got all 3 of the 1 mana cycling lands in here. I have a strip mine. I don't actually own any of the fetch lands, or at least I don't have any that fit in this deck that I own, so my only fetches really are Terramorphic Expanse and Evolving Wilds to pull out my basics. And I have a strip mine in case I need to strip mine something. And I guess the last card I can really bring up, Forge of Heroes. Choose target commander that entered the battlefield this turn. If it's a creature, you put a 1/1 counter, and if it's a planeswalker, it gets an extra loyalty. So yes, it's a way to give Aminatou a head start on her loyalty tokens. 4 islands and 3 swamps, doesn't seem so many, but the deck is more skewed towards white, so we have 8 basic planes in the deck. And that, my friends, is Aminatou the Fateshifter. Let me know what you think about using this website to show off my decks. And I may also use this to show off other people's decks as well. We'll see about that. I'll focus on mine for now since I've done a lot of brewing in the past several months. Yeah, one last victory lap here. One last look at all of the wonderful cards in this deck. It's won me a couple of games at my LGS, local game store. And yeah, let me know what you think about this presentation. Let me know what you think about this deck. Let me know if I should do other people's decks on here. And I'm going to also see going forward if I have the ability to record some arena gameplay. I have a few interesting, albeit not at all competitive decks on that. I've been playing Commander so long I've forgotten the art of building a good 60 card deck. So hopefully I'll learn to make some competitive 60 card builds that will win me some games and help my competitive rank a little bit. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your weekend. I will chat with you all again soon.